Hi, this is Teresa from Phoenix Gate Crafts, and today I wanted to talk about setting the price for your handcrafted items. Now, I'm doing this with a focus on knitting and crochet, but this can work for many different forms of creative arts. And it's a bit industry specific, so I wouldn't do a painting this way or woodworking. Those have their own industry standards, which I'm not familiar with. But I want you to know about the complexity of setting prices. There are three kind of conventions with it and the ramifications of some of these choices. So let's get started. So, the first convention when setting prices for your handcrafted goods is to take the cost of materials and then add an hourly rate for your time. This allows you to get fully paid what you are worth. So, if you're making a little washcloth and you use about $1 worth of yarn for it at full price, when you get the yarn for full price, and then it only takes you about 20 minutes to make it because you're crocheting and that goes pretty fast, and you're charging $10 an hour, so 20 minutes is 1/3 of an hour, so 10 divided by 3 is 3.33 plus $1. That's $4.33. You can round up to a nice even $5 for the washcloth, and that's a pretty reasonable price for a handmade washcloth. You can do a set of 4 for $15, just to kind of give a little bit of a discount for the bundle or something to that effect, and you'll be set. That's the convention. The problem is that when you're getting into bigger handcrafted items with slower methods of construction, you wind up with very high prices with that. So my classic example is a blanket. A blanket can take anywhere from 24 to 72 to 100 hours to make, depending on what you're making, how big it is, what your style of craft is, because knitting takes way longer than crochet. Also depends on the thickness of your yarn. And then, so, if you're working on something for 72 hours at $10 an hour, that's $720 for a blanket. And that's really expensive, and most people are not willing to spend that much on a blanket. There's a practicality to that price, and that's not even getting into the maybe $100 that the yarn cost. So there's that option. It can get very high, but most smaller items, that is a very practical way to plan your price. Another convention tends to bring the cost down to something reasonable, but profit can still be made. It's not true profit because the hours aren't getting truly paid for, because the next convention is taking the cost of the yarn and multiplying it by 3. So by this method, that dishcloth, which uses about $1 worth of yarn, times 3 is $3. You're not getting paid for that 20 minutes exactly, because we already established that that alone is $3.33. But you're still making some money on top of the cost of the yarn. You can buy twice as much yarn, and it's not a big deal. The problem with that is you're not getting paid what you're worth. I find this one to be a pretty happy middle ground, especially with larger items. So, if you're making that blanket that costs $100 worth of materials, you charge the customer $300. People pay several $100s in blankets all the time. So not unreasonable, especially considering it is handmade and, you know, you can fix mistakes or if it falls apart. So that's usually a much more reasonable amount. Some people still consider that too high because, you know, if I go to Walmart, I can buy a blanket for my bed that's about $150. So you can always charge whatever the heck you want. That's the third convention, charging what you want. With this convention, typically you at least charge the cost of materials. And a big piece of advice, regardless of which form you take for your crafting prices, you should always ask for the cost of the materials up front, because it's not uncommon for somebody to be like, oh yeah, $300 for a blanket? Not a problem, I'll do that. So you spend $100 on the blanket and then come to find out, no, they really didn't think that was the real price. They thought you were going to come down. And they don't have that, and now you're out $100 and you didn't make $300. So asking for the cost of materials up front and then charging the rest upon delivery is actually a very reasonable form of collecting payment. But, you know, if you're doing this for friends, if you're doing this for family, you know, charging the cost of the yarn, maybe plus a little bit, maybe doubling the cost of the yarn so at least some of your time is being paid for. Charging them for your time if they're willing to buy you the yarn you need. These are all options. The problem is that some people wind up making items for sale as their careers. This is something they do professionally with the intent of making money. And by severely undercutting them that much, by only charging a fraction of what it's worth, is cutting into their bottom line because it isn't teaching your customer base to pay the price that values you. But here's a little thing. Let's get into some economics here. Do you remember economics class and that stupid cross chart? Supply. The supply line starts at the bottom. For you, it would be here. And as the price increases, supply increases. You're more likely to want to sell more of the things that cost more. And as for demand for an item, as the cost increases, demand decreases. So where the supply line and the demand line meet is the price you need to charge for the item. It does not matter if that price covers all costs. If that price does not cover all costs, you need to cut your costs. That's business. And if you're selling items, it is a business. So $100 for a pair of socks is not within most people's budget. But $50 might be something that some people would consider. So that's between you and your client, because ultimately the price it sells at is the price you can get. So if you're not sure what to sell it for, charge a higher price and then let them negotiate you down. As long as they don't go below your lowest point, you're okay, because you're at least making what you want to make. And ultimately, if you're able to find a client who's willing to pay your price, that's awesome. But also realize that if you set your price too high, you're not likely to have any customers. And it is a delicate balance. So good luck. May the odds be ever in your favor in regards to selling your items. And happy crafting. Bye.